Now, shifting focus to the India-US trade ties, Union Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal and US Trade Representative Catherine Tai held bilateral trade talks in Washington on Wednesday. Both countries ruled out a mini-trade deal or a free trade agreement between the two nations in the near future. However, Piyush Goyal said that India and United States are thinking big when it comes to their trade relationship. Both sides have formed a forum on resilient trade, and Piyush Goyal also took up the issue of delay in business visas. I spoke to Atul Keshap, former US diplomat and president of the US-India Business Council, began by asking him if it's a good idea to put off a trade deal and whether there should be more ambition in the US-India trade partnership.
I just hosted Minister Goyal in New York City with our board and our members. The optimism in the room was fantastic. Everybody sees India's growth trajectory. They know that India's GDP is going to rise by multiples. And the challenge, I think, the responsibility of both of our governments is to capture that potential to the fullest for both of our citizens, 1.7 billion citizens, and to uplift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. So we have to get it done, and we must be more ambitious.
Right. Talking about some of the outstanding issues in the trade relationship right now from the US side, what would those be?
I think that we are facing an enormously turbulent geostrategic picture. And one thing that really strikes me is that both of our officials, both sets of officials, when they talk to me, talk about trust. Frankly, we trust each other. And that is the glue that is going to carry us forward. So whatever the issues are in the trade relationship, I put them within the much larger frame of the world's two greatest democracies working with each other to unleash human potential across the century, leverage what is going to be India's unbelievable rise in this century, and transform the entire world to make humanity healthier, happier, and frankly, as free as our two countries enjoy right now. So there are many different issues that need to be addressed, but I think we're addressing them in the spirit of partnership and friendship, and above all things, trust.
Coming back to the issue of more ambition for a trade partnership between both India and the United States, why do you think the trade deal lost momentum? And is there disappointment among businesses that this trade deal is no longer being discussed?
Neither in your country nor in my country is there any king who can wave his hand and we can have a trade deal. Ours are layered, complex, pluralistic, free societies. The people have to be at the point where these trade deals can go forward. They are massively complicated. They have huge implications for both your country and ours. It is my sincere hope and prayer that our countries will achieve a free trade agreement. But short of that, given the politics that we have to face every day, there are areas and dimensions of low-hanging fruit that we should take care of and address as friends in the Trade Policy Forum. Get those out of the way, maybe have a digital services agreement, maybe have MOUs on various elements of critical and emerging technology, maybe work on supply chain issues, especially as we face, the challenges post-pandemic of ensuring resilient and secure supply chains. Get that done, and over time the politics will get to the point where a free trade agreement is easily done.
Right. One final question on the trade aspect before we move on. Why do you think there is some sort of lack of momentum within the United States or lack of appetite for trade deals at the moment? It's not just India, but there seems to be an overall lack of appetite for trade deals.
Look, I'm overseas right now, and as a patriot, the rule, and as a diplomat, the rule is you don't talk about politics back home. But you know how it is. I mean, our politics are tough. Trade deals require a pretty heavy consensus across both parties, and it's just not the moment, right? But I do give the administration credit for having the Trade Policy Forum. India is in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is very important. India is our trusted and valued Quad partner. We do more things with India today than I could have even dreamed of 20 years ago.
There was an important announcement during the visit of Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal after his meeting with the USTR Catherine Tai about setting up a forum on resilient trade. How important is this for the two countries?
It's extremely important. The pandemic taught both India and the United States some very harsh lessons. And I think both of our governments have learned those lessons, and they are going to look at supply chains. They're going to look at where there are issues in terms of being able to ensure resilient and secure supply of necessary items for the happiness and well-being of our people, and they're going to address it. And they're also going to look at the trade facilitation required to make ease of commerce between our countries that much better. As Quad partners, we have a special responsibility to ourselves, to the Indo-Pacific, frankly, to the entire world. So I think it's a great initiative, and I wish them great success.
The Ukraine-Russia war, it's almost completing a year now. How has that impacted the trajectory of US-India business and economic ties?
I would say that it reveals something very important between us. We worked through this. When I say we, I mean the US and India. We worked through this in a respectful, constructive manner that indicates the amount of appreciation we have for each other and, frankly, the strategic convergence between our countries. There were public disagreements, in op-eds and in the media, but privately our governments worked very hard to reassure each other of our global strategic and economic imperatives. And so when you look at when Secretary Yellen came here in November, she talked about India as a friend-shoring destination. And this, my friend, goes back to the element of trust. The most important thing in a relationship.
You speak about friend-shoring. How would India and US, and how would the business chambers between both the countries work on realizing this goal of friend-shoring? Is that a strong agenda, big agenda item for the US government? There's going to be several engagements between India and US at the highest level. Are we going to see some sort of policies in order to operationalize this thought on friend-shoring?
If you recall, when we last spoke, I talked about high-trust ecosystems, and I talked about a free world supply chain. Those conversations happen in public sometimes, but they also happen in private. And I'm very glad that both countries are now looking at the issue of friend-shoring. Obviously, Prime Minister Modi's government has been very keen on attracting investment into India. And I think our companies and Indian companies are realizing the potential of diversifying their supply chains in a way that ensures that our citizens always have the things we need, even in an extreme scenario. So to answer your question, USIBC, our professional staff in India and in the United States, part of the United States Chamber, myself and all my colleagues unceasingly work every day on thought leadership and advocacy. We don't do it for ourselves necessarily, we do it for the two countries and for their well-being. So when we start to talk about friend-shoring, it's because our member companies, our professional staff realize that, and then we put forward ideas in a respectful and constructive way to help our peoples.
I'd like to ask you about US-India trade this year. We're looking at a global slowdown, and that slowdown is impacting the United States as well. Do you think the import of Indian goods into the United States is going to see a dip this year, probably a sharp dip?
I'm not sure that's going to happen. If you look at job creation in the United States, we've had a great year in job creation, or last year in job creation. Inflation certainly hit us the way it hit you due to the war. Mr. Putin's war put a shock through the entire system. But when I look at what's happening in the States, consumer confidence is a little guarded, but I'm not necessarily certain it's going to impact Indian imports.
Talking about areas where you would be seeking greater exports, greater market access in India this year, what would be those key sectors be?
We want a level playing field. We want to be able to compete on par and bring the highest levels of ethics, managerial capability, technology, business know-how to bringing good products at good prices to the Indian people and the broadest possible selection. In a way, this is business's service to the rise of India as a healthy, happy, prosperous country. A colossus in world affairs is the potential that lies imminently in India's future. And if India's people are healthy and happy, they have access to the world of consumer goods, services, then that's good for them. I would say level playing field, ease of doing business, transparency, predictability of regulations. The Prime Minister himself the other day talked about clearing out some of the thicket of regulations that have a long legacy behind them that need to be removed in order for business really to boom in this country. I do think, and I share the vision, that India could be a $30 trillion economy.
All right, there will be several high-level engagements between India and US in this year. That's all we have time for. Thank you for watching and goodbye.